So hey Al, I think Al is the so I know you're under L, but your name is actually Andrew, right?
It is Andrew Lee Rubinger. The L is for Lee, Lee.
And you're still wearing the suspenders?
The suspenders. Was I wearing suspenders at some point?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh my gosh. I probably not. I don't think.
I think I remember you. You always, there was a joke or something like this, so you had, the suspenders because you were together with the Mojave Linux. What was the, on Twitter?
With Dan.
Yeah. And you
Oh,
were,
sure. Yeah.
And you had the suspenders, just a joke, I think, in one point of time, 10 years ago.
Oh my gosh. I wonder. Yeah, it was. They were. There are any number of nights that we've forgotten, probably.
Oh, okay.
But I can't say I remember the suspenders, but definitely my time working with Dan and on those projects very fondly. And he and I got to speak a few weeks ago, and that was wonderful.
Perfect. And okay, so the show is not about suspenders, rather than what was your first computer?
Oh, my first computer. Oh my gosh. Yeah, you want to take it way back. My father had some like old PCs going back, and I remember my first program was in GW Basic.
Okay.
And I had some like elementary school project. It was like a separate from schoolwork, but like another program we were doing in school that was centered on creativity and self-centered learning. And it was there's a classical music piece called Gavotte, and then I was using GW Basic with this sound command to like reprogram Gavotte. Like I had the music sheet written out. Mm-hmm. I was playing violin at the time, and I programmed like the internal speaker of the computer to play Gavotte, which was like the system speaker to play this classical music piece.
And you enjoyed that, or you had to do this?
No, I really did enjoy it. It was, I had to do something, but we had a wide berth over what it was, and then had discovered that GW Basic had this sound command.
Okay.
And I thought it was thrilling to tell a computer what to do, to have some agency over a thing that ordinarily you had to conform to quite a bit, right?
Okay. But why you started with GW Basic at all? So why?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Well, I was in I must have been in the fifth grade at the time. Yeah, I was in the fifth grade in our elementary school, our primary school, and it was what was available.
Yeah,
there wasn't too much. There wasn't too much else. I think when you're a kid, right, it's whatever's available to you, and that's a reason that now later in life I come to appreciate how access to computing from an early age can really set you on a path, and how not everyone's got that option. And it can set you back early if you don't.
Yeah, still. But, why you open GW Basic at all and not starting playing games,
Oh, I mean, there were definitely my fair share of games later. Why GW Basic? Yeah, later. Well, it was my father's work computer. I think he had.
Okay.
Yeah, he had Lotus 123. My father's an accountant. He had Lotus 123 on there. It was a monochrome monitor, and there was like that spreadsheet application, Lotus 123. And the game that I would play is if you you could draw in the spreadsheet, like you could draw in the cells, and then if you scrolled down, then the cells would fly up, and that would somehow animate, and that was my game, was Lotus 123. That was it.
Okay, so I get you. So it means you had to use your dad's computer, and there was nothing exciting on it except this game in GW Basic. But still, you like computers, or why you started at all with the computer? I mean, were you fascinated by the machine, or why?
Yeah, I mean, well, there was as a kid there was that. Then there was a gaming phase.
Okay.
There was the gaming phase with I remember King's Quest was a game that was very popular at the time. Mm-hmm. And then I lost my love for gaming. And my brother, I have a younger brother, he's 5 years younger, and he really picked it up. And to this day, he is he works in the gaming industry.
Oh,
as an engineer. So cool. he really took to the gaming. And when I was in college, again with my father said. He had clients, and they were software engineers, and he said, "Listen, you're in school. I'm not going to ask anything of your education, your educational experience. The educational experience is yours, but I would like for you to do one thing. please take a programming class because I think it's something you may really enjoy. And I did, and I was a freshman at university, and that was it. I took that programming class, and I thought that was wild.
Is your dad programmer?
No, he's an accountant, but I think he had clients who were enjoying their careers in programming.
Okay. And so what I understood, so you started with your dad's computer, and then you saw GW Basic, and you tried to program sound because it was fun. What happened after that? So what was after GW Basic? So what you did then?
Yeah, then the games. I hadn't come into much like academic or math based understanding. When I was like in my young adolescence. There was the GW Basic when I was in 5th grade, so that I must have been probably 12 years old, 11 or 12 at the time. Mm-hmm. And then all through high school and stuff, I wouldn't say I was using the computer too much. I'm in a weird generation. Like I'm in the generation that grew up without the internet and then got it in the house. You're like my childhood started without internet, and by the time I left high school, like there it was, and there was dial up, and then my family got broadband the year after I left. Okay. That's kind of like a weird time in history to grow up, I think.
Yeah, but also interesting one, right?
It's like a super interesting one, right? Yeah. So like, I mean, over dial-up, by my senior year of high school, it was like I was downloading my first MP3s, and I graduated high school in 99. So like the state of the web was that like companies were trying to figure out what to use it for. And there was like this question of like, is this something that can make money? Is this something for business? Is this not? Like,
yeah, exactly.
It seems ridiculous now.
So,
but yeah.
Why you downloaded the MP3? Now I'm interested.
Because that was such a better way to listen to music that you wanted, rather than because the other option was to listen to the radio until the song you wanted came on and then hit record on the tape deck.
Yeah,
that was
that's interesting. I was complete different mindset. So what I remember, I did at the beginning of Java or Java E or Enterprise Java it was a Corba RMI and stuff like that, some workshops. And I remember I was in the German telecommunication, and there were people who had access to broadband. And they maintained, machines with hundreds of thousands of MP3s. And they were just talking, the entire lunch break about the MP3s. And I said, okay, but what's the point? You cannot hear to everything you downloaded. And what I did instead, I bought some CDs, which I really appreciated. So I remember back then some, Pink Floyd and some Dire Straits and some stuff which you two really enjoyed back then. And this was it. So I was not that, interested in downloading this same stuff as MP3, and I saved probably a lot of time. And, I spent some money, of course, to buy, the 5 to 10 CDs, but this basically was, right? And I can, if I had the mood, I just, started the CD. And right now I have, of course, streaming, but it's not like that different, and not like exploring all the time new music. So what I search for this, what I know, or something similar, and that is right. So this is what I ask you, because so MP3 as it came out, I couldn't get the point. So why it's so great? So if I download something, then I have to copy it, to MP3 player, and this is the entire hassle with managing the MP3. I say, okay, this is a waste of time. So for me back then, so this was just a question.
Oh wow, you even felt that like the file management of it was like a barrier to entry for you?
No, not at all. But it's a waste of time, because if I have, my CD, which I really like, and I take with me, I can listen to in a car at like a portable CD player and everywhere. So it was no friction at all. And with the MP3, I have to find a site with good quality, download the thing, I remember back then there were people with labels. They had to name the MP3 properly and create catalogs. I say, okay, this is like, a huge, I'm not a professional musician. I just would like to listen to a few tunes. So this just interesting. So that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Like the CD was a very like buttoned up experience. You put it in and all the music was there. I think with the MP3 thing for me was like, I would buy, I worked one shift a week. I worked on Saturdays. I worked at a retail store called TJ Maxx, and then later at Starbucks.
Okay.
And that was, when I was in high school. So like that was the job that I had, and I would take half my money and put it into like savings for college. And then the other half, would either be like the one night out a week I'd like have like dinner with friends or something. But then the leftover was like CD money, and CDs were $12.88. And,
how much were they?
I want to say they were, I think they were either $11.88 or $12.88.
Yeah, the same in Germany.
Was it really? Yeah. It was a very weird, it's a very weird price, but Newbury Comics is the place that was by my home where I'd go. And yeah, I would get I think I got about one album like every other week.
Okay. There's not that much in my case, but it was a similar price, and I worked with, I was a wood industry, so it was a hard job. And similar stuff, but I bought, some, probably one CD a month or something like this. And I had, and I really enjoyed it because there was a nice cover, and I read the lyrics, and with MP3 was for me, okay, I could just download it and, but it's interesting mindset. And yeah, cool. This was just, was really interested. What was your first thoughts about MP3? What I can imagine, if there was, are you from California?
I know, I'm from Boston. I'm from the suburbs of Boston. Yeah,
okay. Sure. I thought, if there are bands like, Red Hot Chili Peppers or whatever, they with no new song every weekend, so there will be a scene which have, really easy access to MP3 and it's harder to get the CDs. This could be a motivation, but...
cool.
Yeah. But, okay, cool. So what it means for me is, so forget about the MP3. It was just interesting topic. But at the university, you started. What you actually studied? Was it computer science?
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah. Right. So I entered university as an undeclared at the University of Massachusetts. Yeah, I entered undeclared, which is you're a free agent academically, I suppose. Right?
I didn't even knew this is a thing. So you can start studying without saying what you're studying.
Absolutely, because most universities, at least in the States, have general education requirements, things like the types of courses, the core stuff that everyone has to do.
Oh,
so that gives you a couple of years of leeway to knock off your core education requirements and try out a couple of electives before declaring a major and working on that track.
That's interesting. So I don't even know it's just possible in Germany. So in my case, it is similar. So there's like a base study, I think it's called. This is the and this is similar for technical stuff for everyone, and then you have to decide. But I think you have to apply already for computer science, and then you could probably switch. But I don't think it is possible just to start study without saying what. Interesting.
Oh, sure.
So you started as undeclared, and then what?
So I started as undeclared by my second semester at the second half of the year. That was, I think when my father had kind of made his request. Actually, no. Well, I'm forgetting an entire part of this. I started as a music production and engineering student at Ithaca College. That's true. I spent one semester at Ithaca College in New York.
Okay.
Studying music production and engineering, and that was awesome.
Cool.
And again, like roll the clock back. This is the fall of 1999, and if you can imagine a world in which a good university does not have a computer science department, Ithaca did not. And I transferred to the University of Massachusetts. I don't know. I'm certain I had good reasons at the time, but right now when I think about them, I don't know how clear they are. But I did transfer to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and that is where I took my first programming class. It was like your intro to programming class, and it was intentionally difficult. Like on the first day of class, they were very clear. Like if you're looking to meet what they called like an R2 math requirement, if you're looking to meet an R2 math requirement, this class is the most difficult way to do it. And I thought that was awesome. I was like very excited, right? Like I was like very receptive to the challenge of it. And it was Java. They were a forward-thinking university, and in the spring of 2000, their intro to programming class was implemented in Java.
Not bad. It was JDK 1.2, I think.
Yeah, that could. I mean, it was so young. I was so new. Everything was so new to me. The things like versions and whatever. I mean, at the time we were just like writing in tech. We're writing in like it must have been like Notepad, and then using Java C to compile stuff, right?
Yeah, this is what I did exactly. This was very common back then. Yeah. And was Java for you something special, or you just did it because you had to?
It was that first class was about like learning about data types
Yeah.
and how memory is stored, and some conditional logic and things like looping structures, like flow control, right? It's just it's conditional logic and flow control, and learning how to make counters and that kind of a thing. And I think I very quickly, after getting through the syntax of it, was like, wait a minute, what's the point of this?
Okay.
Like I have been using software programs my whole life, and I'm hitting this thing and it's on a console, it's on a terminal. How do I make a real program? Like what's the real program? And that's when the self-study part starts to kick in.
Yeah.
And you come to find that like, well, there are these, you can use these. You've used a web browser for stuff, and that's a client, but there's something that's listening to this, and that's called a server. And you can actually write servers that respond to stuff, and you can write them in Java. And once I kind of got hip to that, it was the servlet, it was Java EE, it was servlet protocol, and I needed a server to run it, and it was this thing called JBoss 2.x, and I was off to the races. That was it for me. I thought that was the coolest thing I had ever seen in my life.
I had a similar experience, except that I started with C++, and I would also say, okay, what's the point of all this? And someone mentioned, if you would like to do the real stuff, there is something on the horizon. It's called Oak, which is, of course, Java right now. And I did some research, and I find JavaSoft. It was the company from Sun Microsystems back then, which was founded, or organization founded around Java. And I saw, the beautiful graphics, the coffee logos, like, what's the point? It looks beautiful, but what is it? And then there was the applet with the Duke, and I said, it's a little bit strange, but interesting. And then I was completely hooked. So it was like, also, through my self-study, I found Java as a alternative to C++ or C, and I really like that. So it's similar experience to yours, but it was before servlets. So servlets happened. My first servlet project was around, I think, 1999 or 2000, something like this. It was before 2000. When was it? 2001, I think. As Java Web Server came out. Okay, and so then you did self-study and found the interesting stuff, and then you still enjoyed the university, or you say, okay, now I have to survive somehow, the data structures, and then focus on the cool stuff in my leisure. So what was your
Yeah, so I guess, do you mind if I'll back up just 1 second and then get to because that's a super interesting question. It resonated with me when you said you were also looking for it to do real things, right? There's the learning programming and it spits out whatever.
Yeah.
Very quickly, there were two things I found super interesting. One is that I could start to run Monte Carlo simulations on gambling things, and there was a nearby casino, and I could I could use software to model out what my gambling approaches would be. And I don't know, when you're a kid, and I had a girlfriend at the time who was studying abroad in Italy, and when you could use software to make to model out what your betting strategy is going to be, and then go and get a bunch of money and get enough to fly to Italy to visit your college girlfriend. That is a remarkable motivator.
It would be still remarkable, right now, I would say.
Yeah, it would be remarkable right now. That's totally true. But the biggest part, which you and I both had, was this realization that it was not just the programming language, it was the expressiveness of the web. It was this, this idea that there's this global publishing medium that's available to anyone in the world. This is the most amazing thing that has happened since the invention of the printing press. And all you have to do is learn to speak the language of it, and you can have access to be a global publisher for free.
Yeah.
That's insane as an advancement. And I wouldn't have maybe articulated it in those terms back then, but I think that's what the feeling was.
I had a girlfriend back then, and she was really interested in South Africa, so about the national parks. And at the beginning of the internet, they come with me, and we went to the not server room, but the the computing room, and there was the HPUX, I think, machines. and I fire up the Mosaic web browser, and we looked at South African animals, and she was really delighted what the possibilities are, so how connected the world really is. And on the side note, my students, so at the beginning of, also similar to your story, were I think 180 people who started, and I think 18 people finished the entire study of.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I don't know why. It was not that hard, but probably too boring or whatever. And but the funny story is, what I remember back then, it's a very similar situation to right now with all the social media. There was chat on the HPUX machines, and there were students, sitting, to very near to each other, 30 centimeters or a half a meter, and they were chatting back and forth. And I say, why not turn around and just say whatever you like to say, And this is exactly right now we have, the messages and WhatsApps and whatever. Instead of speaking to each other, they send messages. Okay, this was it started, 1999 or even earlier.
No, and why is that? Because my roommate and I did the same, we did the same thing over like instant messenger. We're in the same room, which is not big.
Okay.
And I guess, I don't know, doing our homework and stuff, but messaging each other instead of just turning around or talking. There was something about maybe the way in which you're willing to share, share of yourself different when you write it down as like it relieves a social anxiety. Maybe I don't know why we gravitated.
Yeah, interesting, right?
But yeah, so you asked about it's like what happened next with the self motivation and also that people in your program, not everyone made it, and this is where I went off the rails a little bit. I got very addicted to this self study and self creation thing, and by my final year of university, I didn't even know this was happening at the time. Because I was so, I think, distraught over it that I was ignoring any of the ramifications of my decisions. But what I was doing was staying up all night and learning and coding and working with I was working with engineers all over the world who were helping me learn and build a thing. And
what do you build?
Yeah, I was building at the time two things. One of them was this idea that if you wanted to listen. If you were like a band or a music publisher, but you didn't want to let people download MP3s, maybe you wanted to stream it. Yeah. And I made a Flash front end and a Java Enterprise back end to upload music and then stream it through the Flash player so it could be streamed.
Cool. Uh-huh.
And and used as a marketing device. And I'm sorry, am I back?
You are back right now.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry.
So you have to repeat. So what you just said is you streamed from the enterprise server to the Flash front end as a marketing tool. You said, right?
Yeah, I had some idea that bands would if they wanted to release their music so people could listen to it but not download it.
Okay.
If they wanted to.
And this was your
business
idea?
I didn't know how to start a business. I don't know. I didn't know how to start a business. I don't know what I was doing. All I knew I was addicted to the idea of building things.
Okay.
And not building a business out of it, but just building the thing. Okay. And I think, what was I, 19, 20, probably pretty naive in the idea that if you just build something cool, then you can build a business around it or it'll take off. And that's totally not what happens. Right.
Okay.
So there was that. And I had an educational system that was a grade tracking and communication system to bridge, teachers, parents and students together so that everyone was on board, particularly at the high school level for what was happening. So it wasn't you could avoid that moment of the kid getting their grades at the end of the term and it being a complete surprise.
So something like Facebook, right?
That was something I think there are systems now that are more like Canvas, I think is.
Okay. No, but it's like a social system with notes.
Yeah.
Right.
It was, I branded it as an online grade tracking system. And it also had the ability to do exams.
Okay.
But again, I was just building software.
But how you got the idea for both systems? I mean,
well, the high school one was built out of, that moment when I was in high school and I would get my term grades and it was always kind of a surprise. I did better here than I thought, or I did worse. And I was like, why am I not getting this feedback in real time? I wanted to shorten the feedback loop.
Okay. And the MP3 one?
Yeah. The MP3 one, why the MP3 one? The MP3 one, because Napster at the time was a huge debate. and ownership of music. Right? I mean, people were just downloading MP3s illegally, and artists weren't getting royalties. And it was a massive debate about whether this is, is this billing, is this sharing? And I was hoping for a way to use the internet to give content creators some agency so that they could still satisfy the need of people to listen to the music, but not necessarily give up the ownership and the royalties.
And this would solve my problem with the CDs, because I could just, download your Flash player, put whatever I like and just listen to it without all the, renaming and categorizing hassle with MP3s. Right?
Yeah. But I didn't know how to make a business out of any of these things. And these things were eventually tackled by other like MySpace was huge, and MySpace was weird because it was like kind of a social network, but also there was a huge band component that had exactly this music streaming thing in it in the bands. And a lot of bands promoted themselves through it. Plus it was part social network. Plus it was,
And it was huge until it suddenly disappeared. This was the interesting part. So I think within 1 year, it just disappeared, right?
Yeah, I don't remember how long it took, but definitely like the winds of change kind of came and MySpace exited. I mean, MySpace sold. I think Tom sold. And then exited the. But in that time,
during the study, so you spent all the time with Java, right? So Java backend with JBoss. So
totally, and sleeping through all of my classes, and I did not realize this until 15 years later. But it is true that in my final year, I took 10 classes, five each semester. Mm-hmm. I got 2 A's, and they were in a repeated independent study for this work I was doing at night. So they didn't count because the independent study had already been done and you can't repeat it for credit. So I got 2 A's that didn't count and 8 F's.
Mm-hmm. And F's are bad, right?
F's are bad. You can't do worse than F's, really.
Okay.
F's is the university's way of saying, like you might as well have not shown up.
Yeah. Interesting. You know why? Because I did a similar experience during the study, but I worked actually whole time for various companies, also with Java, and I thought, I'm really good in programming. So there was one course. It's called Basics of Programming, and I got the F in your world. Yeah, and I say this was impossible. So I think I was somehow a good programmer, but I couldn't pass, the exam. And then I look at the exam and say, okay, this is somehow about programming, but I have to learn, the stuff as well. So the next time I learned for this exam, and then I passed with I don't know whether it was A, but probably B, I would say. But I say, okay, this is really strange, right? Basics of programming, and I'm programming, professionally already, and I cannot pass the exam. So you really have to learn at the university to have good marks, right?
Yeah. I mean, for anything you do, you've got to apply yourself and put the effort in. And I think, look, I was immature, and I don't think I had realized that I was being motivated by something, and all my attentions were there. And, this is now my senior year of university. So 12 years of stuff in the public school system up to through high school. Mm-hmm. And then this is now my 16th year of schooling. And I'm unaware how burnt out I am from it, and unappreciative I am of the opportunity to be in an educational environment. And I was looking to make something and do something. So I thought I left. I walked at graduation, but I kind of had the idea I wasn't actually going to finish. I had no idea how badly I had messed everything else up. But I got a job working on open source things for a company in Boston. And I thought, all right, I'll leave school, and if I have a couple classes, I'll finish it up later. And I was like, that's the whole point of this anyway, right? To get a job, to be a contributor to society, to be able to, right? And I really justified it for myself. And it was a couple of years working with this other company using open source for their solutions. And then another couple of years in New York, using the newer versions of the JBoss Enterprise server. Mm-hmm. And starting to become a contributor and contributing, bug fixes and some feature enhancements and stuff. And then after a couple of years after that, got a job offer to go work for JBoss, which had just been acquired by Red Hat. Mm-hmm. And, gosh, that was like a real validation of everything that I had done. And I was there for 12 years.
Yeah, cool.
I was thrilled to get that job.
2 questions. So the first one, why you started with JBoss as a student? So you could just write everything from scratch. So why JBoss? Because, this is more like startup mentality. So why you picked, enterprise Java stack? You could choose whatever you liked.
I'll give you the same reason that our founder gave when he pitched the thing. It was free and it didn't suck.
Okay.
JBoss at that time had differentiated itself that it had lowered all the barriers to entry for a developer. It was something that you downloaded, unzipped, and you hit go and it fired up. Yeah, cool. That's how it worked. And a lot of other stuff at the time was coming from big players, and there was license click-throughs and get yourself in the sales database and just many barriers to entry. With this, it's just like, hey, you want to build an enterprise class application? We have all sorts of stuff for it. You can just use the web stuff if you want. There's mailing modules, there's messaging, there's a whole world of stuff. This whole suite is free for you to start using. Go right ahead. And it ran right on my machine.
Yeah, cool. And how you got the job after your study?
Because I had the skills.
So you applied for the job, or you were asking over someone? So how you got, the opportunity to work for the open source company?
That was a Craigslist. It was the first job was a Craigslist thing. I think I searched for the term JBoss, and that would pop up a whole bunch of jobs that were looking for engineers that were using JBoss, right? They had JBoss in their shops. And by nature of having done all the self-study and stuff, I had practical experience having built what they were looking, the types of things they were looking to build. Open source was the thing that because it was a community of people that taught me how to do this well, really broke that chicken egg problem of you can't get a job before you have experience, and you can't get experience before you have a job.
Yeah.
Right.
So your behavior paid off, right? So because
the behavior.
Yeah,
I lucked out.
Yeah, cool. And how you got the job at JBoss and Red Hat?
By nature of using their stuff, they had user forums that were very active at the time. So in the user forums, as you were going through your workday for your employer, you might have questions about how to best do things, or and you could be answered. Sometimes it was the project leads who would answer. Sometimes it was other users who had done things before. Sometimes there was an answer that someone had asked months prior and would help you along. And by nature of getting involved in the user forums, you would start to help other people along their way. And that built a little bit of a community. And, then I think the real switch was when I started using some of their more recent advanced tech. They were building out their version of the new EJB container, the new Enterprise Java Beans container.
Oh, it was Java 5 then. It was JBoss 3.
They were on their way to Java E5, and they were starting to build out the release candidates for the third version of EJB, for EJB 3.
Then I think it was around 2007.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what it was. And those release candidates, I started using them, and they had bugs. There was behavior that it was giving me back I wasn't expecting. And I contributed some bug reports, and then in one case, pulled down the source of the server and tried to figure out where the bug was, and sent some stuff into the project team leads. And it, I think when you develop that type of relationship with the people developing the software, they then needed to hire more people on their team. And one day I got an email that was super simple. It just said hey, Andrew, I'm the lead of the EJB3 project. We have an opening on our team. If you're interested, please send me your CV.
Okay. Who was it?
That was Carlo DeWolf.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I had a huge kind of nerd crush on him and Bill Burke at the time as well. And they were both I had to interview with both of them over the phone, and I thought that was wild. Bill was on the specification committee that made this, that was defining the future of enterprise Java. And I was over the moon about that.
I think Bill was a harder interviewer, right?
Bill was a harder interviewer. Yeah. I distinctly remember. I'm sure he won't mind my sharing.
No.
He asked me some questions about some concurrency controls within Java. Concurrency is, when you have many things all kind of happening at once, and you've got to do that in a very, careful and safe way. And he's asking me about implementation differences in some of the various concurrent libraries. And I thought I was being super smart. Because I was like, no. Like clearly I'm an EJB program. I program with EJBs. And the whole beauty of that thing is you don't have to worry about the concurrency because the server takes care of it for you. Mm-hmm. It's isolation. It's security through isolation. Mm-hmm. And he was like, yeah, that's pretty clever. But you are applying for the job of the person that makes the server. So you need to know about the concurrency to make it easy for the user to not know about it. Mm-hmm. And I think I was speechless in that moment and was certain that I had totally messed up my chances to work there.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Great story, actually. And what you did at JBoss then?
Yeah.
You were the container developer, or what was your job at JBoss or Red Hat?
Oh, initially it was to build out our implementation of the EJB container, which was, the thing that handles business logic requests in the enterprise server. And
by the way, as the JBoss 3 came out, the preview, I used the EJB 3 container to hack my heating control, which was the first accepted talk at Java 1, because I applied for Java 1 from 2001, I think, to 2007 with various reasonable talks, and the first one which was accepted is, how to hack your heating control with EJB 3. And the funny story is with that is that the first bug I saw at EJB 3 and JBoss 3 back then is, the packages were not right. So the import, so this was just Java X EJB was in the wrong package. And I thought, and I thought, this is probably a bug. Should I, do something about this? Like, it's impossible. The JBoss guys did a mistake. So I go, how can I submit something? And I just, I will wait, and then it will resolve. So this is, a complete different mindset. From it was like, I was a young developer, so it's impossible for me, to contribute something meaningful to the open source community, and for you it was natural. So why not? Just do it.
Oh my gosh, I remember that. Yeah, no, if I'm remembering correctly, it was, like the specification was evolving over time, and as the specification was being written, Bill was also implementing. We were implementing these tech previews.
Yeah.
So because the spec wasn't final yet, we weren't going to put them in an official namespace like JavaX.EJB or whatever, right? So it was in some separate namespace with the idea that we would use that to signal that this API was not to be relied upon really going forward.
Yeah, exactly.
And then also just when it was all done and locked, then I don't know whether you'd remove your imports and then auto import all the new stuff in the new namespace and it would just work or something. But yeah, that's totally right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's because the APIs were changing.
Yeah. And what I didn't knew that you were you had implemented EJB container, because I met you, I think, the first time in Vienna at a conference in person. So I did a talk about Java 5 something, and did also a talk, and I saw you are evangelist, but you're actually a serious developer, right?
Yeah, or masquerading as one. There was a lot of mentorship. I had gone from being what I thought was a hotshot application programmer at the places I was working into now making software for a global audience and on the server side. And that is a different class of engineer, at least, at the time it took me at least a year, I think, to get properly mentored and comfortable in there. And Carlo was amazing in that regard. He did not settle for anything that was good enough. Things should be right. He was open to disagreement, and you had to make a good case to him. He'd give you all the time in the world to go back and make it right. He was patient, but he was demanding in the final product, and taught me all sorts of things that you don't necessarily get in a smaller company. Like, what is an API leak? Why do you need API separation from implementation? Mm-hmm. How do you avoid cyclic dependencies? How do you make sure you have a good test suite to protect you in the future? Those types of ideals stick with me to this day.
Cool. And you stick with the JBoss container all the time at Red Hat? So what you did, what do you know? What was your journey at Red Hat?
Right. Okay. So at the time that I had met you was probably, along my second big project there. And that was born out of, I'd been working on the EJB container. That's awesome. We're making a server. And I was noticing that to make this thing, to build it, to start it up, to deploy an application, there's this dev to test cycle that was remarkably long. It's just long. Like you just start a server and get a flat file, an artifact from your deployment, a jar file, and deploy it into it. It was cumbersome and slow. And like fundamentally, I was like, why do we need any, it seems to me that the server can just kind of like be there and running, and all it needs is a byte stream, all it eventually needs in the end is a byte stream to deploy it. So why do we need to like package all of this stuff in a separate packaging step? And I had conceived of this thing that then, it was a virtual file. It was an API for a virtual file system of sorts. And it later became the ShrinkWrap library. Yeah. And we paired that with a deployment mechanism called a deployment mechanism that would hook into JUnit as a testing framework. And that became the Arquillian test platform. And that's when we started doing the public speaking, and I met you, and, we really started to like hammer in on the developer usability for enterprise Java and encourage testing because it was going to be easier and more fun.
Yeah, exactly. So, so you are one of the authors of ShrinkWrap as well.
Yeah, I was the creator and author of ShrinkWrap, and then on the founding team of Arquillian. And
wow.
Arshlock had done.
I forgot about that because I have a shirt from you still. So I'm actually downstairs. I got a nice shirt with Arquillian on it because I think I wrote a review for your book or something like this. Or
that's exactly. You wrote the forward. You wrote the forward for our book. That's exactly.
I forgot completely about that. You see how small the world is.
I know.
I just wanted to talk with you because I just remembered. We had lots of nice conversations about productivity, simplicity, Java E5, and I remember our conversations in Vienna, and I think Devox. And what I also remember at Devox was that I met you. I think Gavin King, Dan.
Yeah.
And we had a lunch together, and I said, you have to be careful with the Arquillian thing because it is widely overused. So people are testing, getters and setters with Arquillian, and this is way too slow. And someone from your team said, okay, it was never meant to do this way, right? So this Arquillian is just used you should never use it for everything because it's way too slow. And this is what I remember. And this was one of my, it's like, okay, look, I even know, the committers from Arquillian, and they also say, no, don't use Arquillian for everything, just for system and integration testing if you really have to. And so funny. So it was.
That's totally right. Yeah, you totally nailed it. Like that was the pitch. Arquillian was to expose system and integration tests with the ease of use of a unit test. It was to look and feel like a unit test and allow you to write. Just like EJB was to a component model for business logic. Yep. It let you focus on your business logic. Arquillian let you focus just on your test logic.
Yeah.
And it was meant for system and integration tests and exposed them as unit tests. And that was the simplicity it brought. Yeah. And then we'd see people like, trying to test getters and setters with it. And you don't need to do that.
Yeah. This is a little bit over exaggerated, but exactly what happened. But, because my approach to testing, we had lots of conversations about that, was more like, if let's say you have an entity with some behavior, so you compute text. So you don't have, to start the entity manager, inject the entity manager, fetch a record from the database only to test the behavior. I can just create the entity with new, set, the state, and then invoke the method, and I'm done. And this is the best test ever because I'm even independent from the database. And then if I have, to test, let's say, a service, and the service depends on the list of object which comes from a database, what I can also do, I can just instantiate the service, mock out the list, and I'm done. I don't have to boot the server. And this is where I use Arquillian only in rare cases, but they were the killer cases, where without Arquillian it would be crazy. And the ShrinkWrap was great invention because with ShrinkWrap you can vary, the contents of a war. You can create one war with one interface, two implementations, one interface, one implementation, and one interface and no implementation, and see whether it works. So these were the really interesting killer use cases for Arquillian. And so this is why, there was a lots of discussion about Arquillian back then. And also there were sometimes Spring to Java EE migrations, and the Spring developers always tried, to boot the application server. As I asked them, why you are doing this? Because you can just, create with new POJOs. We have just POJOs and just test them. You don't have, to boot the servers. They say, yeah, but we want, to test the dependency injections. Okay, but if you're testing the dependency injection, you are testing whether the dependency injection is dependency injection is working, which was properly tested by the vendors. And later we will use system tests and we'll test, the whole package. And this was interesting discussions back then.
Yeah, so, and I think they still are, because we still, it was a really powerful tool. And, I don't even know if I agree with all that. And that's the beauty of kind of the debate, is that we felt that like there were a whole bunch of people that felt that they could instantiate an entity manager and put it in there. And we've kind of felt that the power of this was that like, no. If you're testing mocks or you're manually instantiating, then you're not testing the real thing. The real thing is what's provided to you at runtime. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to like ShrinkWrap, then we noticed that people started varying their deployments for testing a varied type of deployment, because ShrinkWrap made it so easy to do that. And then Karel Pilko like very kindly wrote for us that first implementation of ShrinkWrap resolvers, which was to be like, okay, we're going to test by ShrinkWrap resolvers. We're going to test the thing that was like put into Maven. We're actually going to go through the entire Maven dependency resolution mechanism to pull out the thing that's going to be used, represented as the archive for the deployment, and test the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember. I also use resolvers because I also use Arquillian together with Graphene. I don't know whether you are aware of Graphene. It was like you could remote control the browser with Selenium with a nice API. And then resolvers were actually nice because you could say just take all the dependencies. Just interested in the browser. But regarding the entity manager, what I did and still do in projects is I don't care about the instantiation of the entity manager at all during the unit tests. But what I always did is I focus on black box or system tests. So what it means is right now, for instance, in OpenShift or Docker or in the clouds, we package as fast as possible the runtime. It is usually, Wi-Fi, Quarkus, OpenLiberty, Payara, something like this. It boots up. We wait until, the liveness and readiness probes are ready. And then we just launch the system test from outside. So the entity manager is tested in real environment. Real means it looks like, the production environment. And during development phase, we just focus, on the business logic unit tests, some queries. So I don't like, the double tests. I don't have to boot, the container twice, once on my machine, and then even if this is perfect, I still have to retest in an integration environment the same code, which, is slow and problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that was really similar to the position I initially took, right? Like test your business logic inside, then do your full system test.
Yeah.
Then we discovered a new type, which like Aslak and I were calling gray tests at the time, I think.
Aslak, exactly. I remember him. Exactly. He was also on that. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he wrote Arquillian. Definitely, like the core of it, and Bartaj also wrote any number of extensions, including the data one.
Yeah.
So the gray box tests were like, we came to find that like there was also a type of test that needed to not just be black box and not just be on the inside, but did need to be running in the container, where we would actually, we would deploy the test itself as a deployment.
Yeah. So
that it had access to container context and then could do things.
Yeah.
And the reason that we needed to do that was because the enterprise Java framework allowed you to do really powerful, potentially dangerous things with very simple ways. For instance, there are all the transactional annotations, and your business may actually be relying on a proper transactional context, like it always requires a new one, or it suspends another one. Like when you start having nested transactions, this becomes problematic. Like, let's say I walk into a casino and I play 100 games of poker, and there's an error in one of them. The error in that one should invalidate just that one game, not the entire visit to the casino.
Yeah.
So we needed to so the gray box testing was a way to inject the test in there and really get down and dirty with validating your container constraints in the real environment. And that's kind of, the book talked a lot about those types of scenarios.
But I gave you even better example where it was impossible to test the system without Arquillian. This was one of the we can talk about because it was more or less open source then. So I wrote a integration for Vaadin. It was several years ago, and we had to introduce our own scope. I think it was called view scope. It was like, per tab, a browser tab, there will be a scope. All the instances are bound to the browser tab, not the entire browser. And, with Arquillian, what I could do is I could package with ShrinkWrap, some beans, and I just counted the references. How many are they per browser tab? I tried to, break the system and see whether the scopes are actually working. And with Arquillian, it was beautiful because I could just inject the instances and count them. I could also vary the content. So, for instance, what I remember was a browser tab had a path. So I try now to deploy 2 beans with the same path, and I expected a exception. So I can vary, the deployment's contents, or I can just forget, intentionally the path and expect a different exception. And all the validation happens at deploy time. So it was actually impossible to use unit tests for that. So this was one of the killer use cases for Arquillian, and still is. So the gray test is for me like, a power tool or expert mode, but not all applications require that in level of sophistication, because in a typical, data-driven application, you don't have nested transactions. You just have, a transaction at boundary level, and you are ready to go, right?
Yeah, and you were always really good at finding these types of cases, because I remember you had a guide of just like different design patterns to apply, and you might apply them, and it was a continuous, that type of educational material, along with, I remember like David Blevins had a lot of great stuff with OpenEJB, really set out it helped people not just use their thing, but figure out how to get stuff done. It was a great series.
Oh yeah, thank you. But what I actually did, I simplified all the stuff, right? And this is what I wrote 10 years ago. I mentioned it. So we are after recording of the AirHacks TV, and I mentioned again because I get still questions about that. It is always, very basic and simple idea. If you enter the system, you start a transaction, and then you just reuse the transaction because it's natural, and then everything else is like, an expert system, or there's the exception from the rule. So this was the basic rule. And and we always met, the Dan, you, and David Blevins at various Java ones and talk about the stuff. And it was always, interesting conversations. So you sticked with the Arquillian and ShrinkWrap till the end, or you had other missions at Red Hat?
Oh no, yeah. So I mean, we had gotten Arquillian and ShrinkWrap into a good stable point where we were hitting the majority of the use cases we wanted. There was a great extension community, and like a lot of great contribution that Dan had worked in particular to set up in terms of guide translations. And then Aslak was very involved in getting people empowered to write extensions. This notion of like an extensible core was like very, very helpful to us and to the community, because people came up with ideas that we would not have thought of, and they were remarkably successful and well received. And then I moved on. I wanted to get a kind of a greater understanding of how stuff got done in the business of delivering software. So there was a time that I went into the business unit, and I was working under Ray Plosky.
Okay.
And he was just so wonderful at helping me to navigate now like this change in culture from engineering units to business units, and what motivates them. And we started up the developer conference at Red Hat called Dev Nation.
Okay.
And that was like a really wonderful experience to get to work with stakeholders in engineering, but like across the organization and outside in a different way than we'd done before. And it also worked, when we did formalize a developer group within Red Hat with them, on like any number of both like engineering and business related, initiatives to see what we can do to like make sure that we're doing outreach to a developer audience in this now very changing world where like we used to ask the developers like to surrender some things to like the Java Enterprise server, right? Like threading is not going to be yours anymore, and like resource sharing and that kind of stuff to the server. And then when Cube and containerization came along, that's a whole other level of things. You surrender up to the system, and so much less of your application is in your app code and now is, in this grander cloud system. So managing that change has been, very interesting too.
But what's interesting is actually Nothing changed. So what's funny thing is, if you followed the programming restrictions from EJB and Java E, and you understood what actually the ideas were, you were actually cloud native back then, because you never tried, to read files from local file system. You didn't try to lock the threads. It's exactly what you need, on Google App Engine functions or in the cloud. So there is actually no difference. It is, different framing, right? Or the how to name things is different, but the concepts were always there. And developers really complained about the restrictions, the Java E and programming restriction from EJBs, but now you get the same restrictions in Docker or Kubernetes.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think most of my career has been defined by my opinions on the subject of like how much has changed. I think like a remarkable amount has, but you're right about these fundamentals.
Yeah, fundamentals.
These fundamentals. I mean, what you're asking, what we're asking for is for like developers to surrender the tools they know, which is like access to the file system, which is easy, to go do something else. And people just want to do the easiest thing. And that is just like, no, I get an upload, I'll write it on the file system. And it's just not, it's not a way to do it in a cloud native world. And it wasn't a way to do it in any like other hosted world.
Yeah, exactly.
Binding your application into the hardware. And it like, you should never make the assumption that your application is bound into the hardware, even if it is easier. So we struggled with that. And I think the critique I have now for the general industry is that like as DevOps and GitOps have come into practice, I really have to ask myself, over the past decade, it looks like we've made a lot of ops tasks really easy, and we've made stuff that used to be very simple for dev very, very difficult. And I think that's the shift that the industry should really pay attention to now.
Yeah, and you said the changes. So if we would pick application we built, let's say 2010, let's say. So it's a Java 6 time frame. Yeah. And you will look at the source code right now, and I will tell you, the source code runs in the clouds. It will be almost identical source code with a little bit more YAML. But if you focus on business back then and focus on business right now on the domain problems, the source code is almost identical. The problem is, over-engineered projects back then would be absolutely incompatible with clouds right now. This is the funny, observation. So that people back then, some projects try to protect themselves, lots of abstractions and, over-engineering. And this becomes a problem if you migrate a project to clouds. But if you just focus on the domain logic back then, you could very easily migrate whatever you had back then to the clouds right now. So this is my general observation, which is somehow funny. Yeah,
Java Enterprise has been like remarkably resilient, and I think if you're right, if you obeyed those fundamentals and you like properly contained out and modularized your business logic into like something that approximates a plain objects in a sensible model, and then used the interfaces of servlets and messaging systems and other things to handle your interaction with the outside world. A lot of that stuff would just port right over into like new Quarkus things, and maybe with like annotation or packaging adjustments, I think you'd be able to take like a decade-old system and really be able to keep so much of the application code. It's all the packaging and other stuff on top of it, which I find difficult. The interaction of containerizing things, having them all speak together, acting what the authoritative system is, getting the secrets, shared credentials, all of those things, I think, are where we start to see complexity.
So you spent your last years at Red Hat as a manager in business unit?
Yeah, as a manager, both within the developer group and in middleware engineering. Okay. Were my last 2 years at Red Hat, working on really simple questions. I'd kind of say like, if I'm a new engineer, if I'm a new developer and I want to make an application that like reads an HTTP request and writes some content to a database, how long does it take me to stand that up? And I think the answer should be like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Built and deployed in the public environment. That should be 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
And we were working on things like that, like big questions that were not like, how do I improve this component or that component? I wanted to like, how do we improve how all of these things work together and are built together?
Yeah. I name it time to Hello World, how long it takes to see Hello World on the screen.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
Yeah. It is. And a lot of the critique I get is that like, okay, that's cool for greenfield problems and toys and good for demos, but not good for the real world. And the pushback I give there is, well, you need to be able to solve the greenfield case before you can do the iterative development one. And if you can't, understand the system as like the whole of the parts all working together, then I think we're in general, like as an industry, my industry critique, kind of missing the point. And if you point me to a blog post or a series of postings that say in like 2 or 3 pages how to do one simple part of it, something that could fundamentally be like a checkbox, then that's the user design stuff that we're at. And the types of questions I'm after now are let's design our software from the user needs in rather than the infrastructure out. Mm-hmm. It's not my job to like put a configuration option on every single thing that Cube can do. I'm more interested in the like, what's the user need and what's the simplest way we can get them that.
Yeah, and we already had it, right? In the enterprise Java at the beginning, it was very important to configure everything. So everything was configurable. And then was a huge debate, with Ruby on Rails and convention of a configuration or convention by exception, and say, okay, we actually only have to configure the unusual things. And now everything repeats again, I think. So we have, with YAML, not with XML, but similar story. So at the end, you were a manager, and and you thought about things which I'm also thinking a lot. What it takes to start a project, and it should be as simple as possible, as clear as possible. Yeah. And now you are coding again, or still manager?
Well, So to come back a little bit to the leaving school story, right? I had left school to go start this career, and it was very wonderful, and I could convince myself it was all for a reason for quite a while. And over time, like that failure really weighed on me. So in 2016, like 2016, 17, it was like a full 14 or 15 years after I left the University of Massachusetts that I called them back and wanted to figure out how to re-enroll and finish. Because I had, I was aware that I was ready to pick up some educational experience and apply that with the real life one. And they were, one woman in particular in my program office was so gracious in helping me figure out how to reverse this destruction that I had done on my transcript, to figure out how to re-enroll and finish up my undergraduate career. And then I did that over the course of a couple of years. I studied for a course for a test called the GMAT, the Graduate Management Aptitude Test, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I'm just finishing now 1 year at the business school at Stanford University. So I'm in California now, just finishing up a year-long program, which has been just an unbelievable gift to go and step back and think about how you relate to the world, do some self-improvement, think about what you want to do in your life, and do that alongside of like a cohort of people who were continually impressive and pushing you every day.
This is incredible because I have to admit, because I started to work during my study. And mm-hmm. The problem with it is I stop, appreciate specific things like, my building compilers. It's like, why the hell I have to build compilers? I have everywhere there is a compiler, I would just use one. I don't care how to build one. But now I would say I would really appreciate, to go back to school and just learn about compilers again and about, how to build programming languages, just the fun stuff, or even, numerical mathematics or whatever. Back then was not that interesting to me, but now it will be a complete different experience. So I think you are really lucky that you are doing this. It was absolutely the right choice, because now not only, you proved that you actually, so you just repaired your damage from years ago. So I mean, potential damages was just in your mind, but I think your career was great. No one cared. Did anyone actually cared whether you finished the study or not? No one cares actually, right?
I think in life, if you're going to push yourself forward, you have to be the engine of your own change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No one was there saying like you're being held back because you haven't.
Yeah, exactly.
Had enough work experience and success, and with what we were doing, but if you want to really like pull yourself up to a next rung or something, I think you've got to think a little bit about what you want to do, and then hope that there will be people there that will help you along the way. Mm-hmm. And I've been very lucky in my experience that like over the past few years, as I've been thinking about reaching for another rung to try something new, this support network of people around me have been willing to invest in that and help, and that that is like a remarkable privilege.
But what's great, so as I understood, you finishing it now, your study after 15 years break. But but now what it means is you are absolute expert because you have your expertise from programming. You build EGB containers, Arquillian, whatever. Then you have your expertise as a manager from the business unit. And now you're back to school and learned, some hard stuff from back then. So you are now the absolute expert, right? Because you even refreshed the basics again. You had to, I guess, because you are at the university. There is no excuse. So you had to relearn the hard stuff again, right?
It's kind of you to say that. I'll say about the expertise. I'm never going to be the expert in my parents' kitchen. Like they still run everyone still looks at you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
In that way. And I think something I've found with, especially being in this environment over this past year is that like there are so many things to learn and so many different ways in which people contribute, like their expertise, and to be surrounded in an environment with people that have like such varying skill sets. It's so easy to fall prey to this, like imposter syndrome. Like, how do I fit in here, or how do I belong here? And it's taken me maybe a year to get comfortable with the idea that, like, I'm sure that there are things that I do that provide value to the people around me, but also it's cool that I'm, like, just here to receive and kind of learn from everyone around. And it's,
Because I guess you are appreciating more, the content of the course than probably, young students, I think.
Yeah, maybe so. I hear that it's become more of a popular thing for kids to consider taking a gap year before their undergraduate studies, and like I wonder how.
In your case, it was a gap decade, right? So
yeah. For me, it was but it was all burnout, right? And I wonder, just does a little bit of perspective is that necessary? I guess it was for me. A little perspective was necessary to appreciate the learning environment. And be receptive to it. Because,
but if you started, one question, final question. So if you started to study again, have you thought, briefly what I've done, why I'm doing to myself,
why have I done this past year?
Yeah, because if you start to study, you say, okay, I will just restart my career at the university. And then, the hard stuff starts. I guess you had to do some base courses or whatever, and you say, okay, why I have to relearn all the stuff? What I done, or you just enjoyed everything?
I've enjoyed I think I've enjoyed everything.
Yeah,
if the first part of my career was about developing hard skills to become like a good software engineer, and then a very niche one at that, then the second part has been more about like, hey, there's lots of different types of people. They relate to the world in different ways.
Okay.
Maybe think a little bit about how you show up for them, and for the skills you want to develop. Some of them take years of intentional habit building to develop. So to put yourself on that path is to recognize the very painful process in the ways that you're not as effective as you want to be. Mm-hmm. And then the process of trying to change like patterns of behavior. And that takes years. And I think, like rewiring your habit And that's where I'm at now. And I have just nothing but appreciation for being able to walk that path a bit.
Cool. Hey, this was actually a great interview. So thank you. Where people can find you? Have you, your Twitter handle or?
Oh yeah, no, sure. Yeah. So my Twitter handle is at AL Rubinger, stands for Andrew Lee Rubinger. I think in public, that's probably the best way, to have a conversation. And, I look forward to it. Adam, it's been awesome catching up with you, man. I thank you so much for this. This has been great.
Yeah. Thank you. As actually we planned this for almost a year. So we lost track, and then I just,
that's my fault.
I just, went through the to-dos. I really have to talk to you, because why I'm doing actually the AHEX-FM podcast, because it is exactly like with you. I know many people from conferences. The problem with me is I never worked for larger companies. I did my job, and conferences were just fun or just a leisure. Sure. So I just traveled to the conference, said something, and came back and never had time, to talk to the people. So now I just misuse the podcast medium, to have an interesting 1 hour conversation about the background. And no one had to prepare. So I do lots of forgotten things, we revealed during the conversation.
No, it's great. It feels like any of the times that we've sat down somewhere outside of a conference hall or something and had to chat. It's great.
Yeah. So thank you a lot. And I would like to re-invite you in future. So thank you and bye.
I love it. Thanks so much, Adam. Bye.